How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? What's the real truth about Citizen Kane?
It'll probably turn out to be a very simple thing.
Hello, everybody. We hope you're doing well. I'm Max.
And I'm Parker.
And welcome back to Better Than Citizen Kane, the highly subjective show where we look at a movie and ask the question, is it better than Citizen Kane?
As always, if you like Citizen Kane, that's fine, because we're not here to hate on it. But when every movie ever made is a reasonable contender for the title of greatest film of all time, you have to wonder.
Better than Citizen Kane?
So, kick off your boots, pour yourself a cool glass of leche, and join us as we fall feet first into this week's pick, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
Well done, Parker. I think that was really smooth. But I think there's one thing we could have done differently to open this episode, and here's what I think it is.
Okay.
Starlight. Starbright.
I didn't know we had Antonio Banderas in the studio today.
I can't complete it. Damn it, I practiced this. Oh, how does it go? I had it written out.
It is exactly what you think. It's every version of The Wish Upon a Star.
Yeah, but I'm blanking.
Starlight, Starbright, first star.
Thank you.
I wish I
might, and then here's what I think should be added.
Okay.
I wish I might get Rosebud back tonight. What if that was the movie?
What if that was the movie?
What if he was like, I need Rosebud back?
What if the last wish was the sled Rosebud?
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Now that's better than Citizen Kane.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Anyway, thanks for humoring me, Parker, who had to listen to that, and also everyone else who also had to listen to that. Thanks, everybody.
It's good stuff.
For choosing to let me do that.
Okay, so we're looking at Puss in Boots: The Last Wish this week, Max. Tell our lovely listeners, why are we talking about this movie?
Why wouldn't we talk about Puss in Boots: The Last Wish? No, it's a great movie. It's a fantastic film. It's a great use of animation as a medium. Yep. It's a surprise hit, as, you know, a long, I wouldn't call it awaited sequel to a spin-off to Shrek. So here's why we're talking about this, because December 30th, 2022, Parker and his lovely partner, Kate, they took me to the movies like I was a child.
We did, yes.
And they took me to see Puss in Boots: The Last Wish in theaters, and they said, we saw this and it's amazing. And I was like, okay, I believe you. I trust you, because, you know, we tend to like the same movies. But I wasn't entirely sure what to expect, really. And then we got there and I watched it, and it's a beautiful little film. It's a beautiful little film that did so well at the box office. I'm so happy about it. Again, it's based on a parody of Zorro from Shrek 2.
Yeah.
Parker, what else did you say about it?
No, just that, like, we wanted to do something that was very contemporary. We wanted to try and bring something on the show that had just recently come out, in like the last 6 months. This was one of our favorite movies from last year. And additionally, as well as just our own personal feelings about the movie, as you mentioned, the movie's been doing very well at the box office and has been kind of climbing its way up, which is really great. It opened against Avatar, and so the fact that it still has legs at all is a really good sign for animated movies, I think. But also, one of the other big reasons we did this is
Avatar's also an animated movie.
So true. That's very, very true. But it is not marketed as such.
December was a great month for animation. Puss in Boots, Pinocchio, Avatar, The Way of Water.
But one of the other big reasons that we did this is because for any of you listeners who are familiar, there is a wonderful app out there called Letterboxd, and it's basically just social media for film buffs. You can log your movies, you can make lists, you can see what your friends are watching, all those good things. And they have on there a list that is compiled of, like, what are, according to user ratings, what are the highest rated films of all time on Letterboxd so far, right? And I don't know exactly how their kind of calculations work. I think it might have something to do with, like, how big of the audience is for a movie versus how many of those people rated it highly.
Yeah, it's like if a movie gets a certain number of reviews, then it starts to, like, chart on there, I think. Like if a movie has like 300 views and like most of them are 5 stars, it's not going to be top of the list. It has to like surpass a certain number. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. But basically, yeah, it's if enough people have watched it and then it makes the list, and then from there it's, 5 stars. So for example, one of the top films on there is, a 70s Italian film or whatever, and that's been seen by like 50,000 people, and 35,000 of them gave it 5 stars, as opposed to something like, I don't know. Well, then Parasite is above that, and that has comparatively like 900,000 reviews, mostly 5 stars, but they're like neck and neck because of the 5-star rating, as opposed to like, it's not weighed by.
Right. So again, that's a good explanation. And like, again, we aren't sure exactly how it works, but essentially this list is ever changing on how people are reviewing the movies or whatever. But kind of a very entertaining thing is this list is the top 250 narrative films on Letterboxd. And it is, professionally curated by the Letterboxd staff. There was a time Puss in Boots cracked the top 100.
Yeah.
The top 100 rated narrative movies of all time.
It passed Seventh Seal? And couldn't crack Interstellar?
Couldn't quite beat. I think it beat Interstellar for a minute. They keep swapping places, but there was a time where it was in the top 100. We checked it last night. I think it's down to 102 or 103 now.
103, and it's just above Alien. That's where it's
Which is a wild claim. Like, putting that into perspective, that's a movie I definitely want to cover at some point. Alien is incredible. So the fact that a movie that came out in December, enough people are like, oh yeah, that's better than Alien.
And I'll say this as well, though, and I've made this point before, is the thing about the Letterboxd 250 is that it's based on user interaction. So if a lot of people are seeing a movie, which is the case with a lot of modern movies, more so than something like Alien, a lot of Letterboxd, there's a large chunk of people who probably haven't gotten to Alien yet, like me, and haven't.
Max.
Hey.
Max. It's my favorite horror movie, Max.
All right. And? You think just because we're friends that means anything to me? No. We'll get to it. I think it'd be fun to do it on the podcast, like you said.
It would be.
But so something like Parasite can be at number 2, but then also there's a large percentage of these top 250 are more recent films. Not a large percentage, but like there's just more. There's more that people have seen because they've come out recently. They're easier to get to. They're easier to watch. They're streaming, that sort of thing. So a huge part of why I think Puss in Boots is there is one, it's new. So it's in theaters. A lot of people can just see it anywhere. It's streaming. They can see it all the time. So that helps push it onto the list at all if it's easily accessible. And also, it's a really great film. Is it better than Alien? I don't know. I literally don't know.
You have no idea.
I have no idea.
I would take a gander to guess that it isn't. Like, I really like this movie, but that's kind of what's wild to me is that I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, but it is. It's a really good movie.
It's a really good movie, but also what's interesting about that list, Parker, that you brought up, Citizen Kane doesn't appear on it.
I don't think it
does. Or
does.
it's like number 243, but I'm pretty sure it's like not on the list.
Let's see. I don't think it's on the list.
I don't think it's on the list, which means that the Letterboxd user base has already decided.
Yeah, they've made up our minds.
That Puss in Boots is well over and better than Citizen Kane.
It does not appear on the list.
Great.
Yeah, so that's the podcast, everybody. I don't know what to tell you.
I don't know what to tell you.
Letterboxd decided.
Letterboxd told us. The internet told us it's better, so that must be true.
Yes.
No, I think that sets us up for a very interesting conversation where we let's battle that claim a little bit. Let's discuss it, not battle it. Let's talk about whether or not we think that's the case. But first, let's talk about Puss in Boots: The Last Wish on its own.
So my general thoughts on this movie are that you have to understand, I went into this movie with the lowest of expectations. I went to this movie as a bit because I am very firmly planted against Avatar and James Cameron and everything that movie represents for Hollywood. And I just saw it just, busting up the charts and breaking box office records. And I was getting frustrated about that. And so I was like, okay, what could I go give my money to instead? How could I try to counteract this? And the only thing that was playing that looked mildly interesting was this movie. And I'd seen when the trailer had come out and people were really excited about it because they're like, oh, they're doing the Spider-Verse thing. Like this animation looks stylized and
animating on 3s. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So people were like generally cautiously optimistic about it. But again, this is like you said, a sequel to a spin-off of a Shrek movie. And my experience with Shrek has been, I wasn't allowed to watch it at all.
Your Shrek experience?
Yeah, my Shrek experience is I wasn't allowed to watch it growing up at all because my parents thought it was, inappropriate, gross out humor. And then I watched the first Shrek for the very first time like 2 years ago. And watching Shrek for the first time at like the age of 24 is not the primary demographic for that movie. And I didn't enjoy it very much. And that has been my experience with Shrek.
Yeah, you've refused to move past it.
Exactly.
You refused to go to 2. You refused
No.
You refused to get Shrek'd 2, 3, and 4 more times.
Exactly. And so
so you had no Shrek expectations going.
I had no Shrek expectations. I had no reason to love this movie. I kind of guessed I wasn't going to enjoy it very much.
But I will also say this, Parker, you do love Zorro. And you love Antonio Banderas' Zorro.
I love Antonio Banderas'
And
Zorro.
so, in some ways, maybe you were primed to love this movie.
That's true. And
you're a fan of sword fighting. You're a fan of animation. You're a fan of
very
Zorro.
True. Like, yeah, now that I've seen the movie and know what it is,
right.
I'm like, oh yeah, this is absolutely like my 4 quadrants. Like this movie was made for me. But just outside looking in, I was a little bit hesitant about it.
Especially since you haven't seen Shrek 2.
Right. I haven't even seen the movie
Puss
in Boots
2011.
Yeah, I've seen the memes and I've seen a couple clips. Yep. That's about it.
Great.
That was kind of my experience with the movie, and it was just one of those perfect theater going experiences where I walked out and I was just like jaw on the floor. Like that was so much better than it had any right to be. Like, are you kidding me? And it was like, I've been lucky enough in the past year to have that kind of experience with movies like 2 or 3 times, which has been really exciting. Where like, it's a very rare thing for me to like watch a movie. And usually I like a lot of the movies I watch. In general, I'm like, oh, that was a really good movie. But there is such a weird like Venn diagram experience of right in the middle of loving a movie so much that you have to show it to other people. You're like, you need to watch this movie. And for me last year, like the big ones for that were like RRR was one of those where like I watched it. I was like, I need everybody I know to watch this movie, which is kind of crazy because it's a 3-hour indie epic and it's a hard sell, but everybody I've shown it to adores it.
Yeah.
And this is another one. And this one has been so much easier to get people on board with. One, because it's shorter, and 2, it's just a little bit more accessible. And so we watched it together last night for the podcast. And I think that was my 6th watch of that movie since it came out.
Yeah. Which was what, like 3 months ago?
Exactly. Yeah.
And you've seen RRR how many times in the last, what, like 9 months?
I think also 6.
Yeah. Those are your 2 favorite movies.
Those are my 2 favorite movies from 2022. But like, that's just such like, it's a hyper specific experience of movie going that I don't get very often, where you're just like, have this electricity.
You're floored by it.
Yeah. I need people to watch this. Like I need my friends to see this thing.
Yeah.
Which is why, Kate and I brought you to the theater.
You took me to the theater,
and
then I walked out and I was just like, what?
What?
Yeah, great. It's a good movie. And then I took my friends to see it. Mm-hmm. It's like a pyramid scheme.
It is, yes.
But in like the good way. A cone scheme?
A cone scheme.
No, that implies that it starts with everyone seeing it and it all gets down to one person. I don't know what that is. Anyway, should I talk about my Shrek experiences?
I would love that.
Okay, great. So going into this movie, I had actually seen 3 of the Shrek movies.
Oh,
I saw Shrek and Shrek 2.
Here.
I grew up Shrek 2. I wouldn't call myself a Shrek. I haven't seen Forever After, so I can't take that claim. I haven't seen Shrek the Halls, Parker. All right,
yes.
I'm not well
seminal
versed.
holiday classic.
I'm not an amateur. I'm not new to this, but I'm also not the most Shrek experienced guy.
I see.
So, no, but yeah, I mean, I grew up watching Shrek. I grew up watching Shrek 2. Shrek 2 is the only one we ever had on DVD. So I've seen that one a lot more than the others. In fact, I have it here in my apartment. I swiped it with the intention of bringing it to your house and forcing you to watch it. Because I know that you wouldn't get it on Plex. I know you wouldn't do that.
No,
you wouldn't do that to yourself.
Why would I take up space on my media server for that?
So it's here waiting. One of these days, I'm gonna bring it down. No, but yeah, so I'd seen those. I have seen the first Puss in Boots, weirdly. Look, I'm not a fan of Shrek. I wouldn't say I'm a fan. I just like Shrek 2 because I grew up with it and I think it's a bit silly.
And yet you're willing to forcibly make me watch this movie.
Well, yeah, because in the same way that you're like, Max, you have to watch Alien.
Yeah, but Alien's a good movie and I like Alien.
And that's
I am an Alien fan. You just were a self-professed non-Shrek fan.
Yeah, well, look, I don't know. Leave me alone, all right? I don't know where I stand on Shrek. So I'd seen the first Puss in Boots. I think it's what I call a birthday party movie, where you saw it at someone's birthday party. The parents got it at Redbox for the party, and we watched it. And I think, I'm trying to think of any other movies that also fit that.
I've had that experience with Now You See Me.
Ooh, that's a great...
That's a birthday party movie.
That's a birthday party movie, yeah. I'd seen the first Puss in Boots. I remember not liking it. And I think my friend had been in Shrek the Musical, but I didn't go see it because that makes me feel weird. I don't know why. I don't like the look of it. I don't like the look of Shrek the Musical. And I think that's all the Shrek stuff.
Nice.
So all that being said, I'd seen most of the movies that you need to see, but you don't even need to see them. That's my point. I went into this and I went, oh, I don't even need to remember anything because this movie stands on its own completely. And I think that's intentional as to why they didn't put like a 2 in the title.
Right.
Right? Like it's been 11 years. Most people aren't, remembering that Puss in Boots 2011 came out. They're just like, oh yeah, the cat from Shrek. All right, yeah. The Zorro cat from Shrek. And I think that's the perfect way to enter this movie. Just go in and be like, all right, yeah, it's a Zorro cat. And he might be from Shrek.
Absolutely.
And that's what you knew, and that's what I knew, and that's what everyone knows going into this. And then they have a great time.
They have a great time. All right. So since this is a very recent movie, we don't have to do this very often because these movies have been out for a really long time usually. But for anybody listening, consider this your spoiler alert warning. We are going to be going into the depths of the movie. So if you haven't seen the movie and you'd like to, go watch it, come back, take a listen when you're done, because there's some really great stuff in this movie and we want to be able to talk about it. But also, just so you know, that's what's about to happen.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, the basic premise of the movie is that we're following Puss in Boots, legendary outlaw, hero to one and all. He is down to his last life. Cats have 9 lives, and he has died 8 times, and dies his 8th time at the beginning of this movie, and suddenly is faced with the threat of mortality, which I found out recently. I don't know the exact history behind this arrangement, but there was a period of time where director Guillermo del Toro was like a creative head over at DreamWorks Animation. And during his stint there, they were doing development on this movie. And that premise pitch came from del Toro, which 100% fits once you know that. Like if you've seen any of his movies, like that is such a del Toro idea of like, what if we take this beloved animated cat and make him face mortality and realize that he's running out of time? And it's a great premise. It's really good. But the inciting incident is that there is a wishing star out in the middle of the dark forest that has fallen.
The wishing star.
Exactly.
It exists. However he says it.
And so a bunch of people are trying to get to the star before he does. And he wants to get to the star so that he can make a wish and get basically a Doctor Who version of a new set of regenerations. He wants 9 more lives.
Yeah. There it is. Is that our first mention of
I think it is
Who on the pod?
Yeah, one of many. Yes.
Good.
But yeah, so that's kind of the basic pitch of this movie. And it's just I don't know how to talk about this. It's so good.
Yeah, well let's just start from the beginning. So yeah, it opens with Puss in Boots in the town of Del Mar. I think. Yeah. Yes. And he fights a giant, and it's fantastic. The whole clip is on YouTube. Yep. The whole opening, 9-minute fight sequence of this movie is on YouTube, and everyone should go watch it. It is, I think it's my favorite fight sequence in the movie. There's other great sequences in this movie, but
there's one that might take the cake for me, but that one's pretty close.
But the giant fight just, when I saw that the first time in theaters, I was, again, my jaw dropped. I was like,
I leaned over and saw you watching the movie and you looked at me just
it's the most exciting thing in the world to see. Yeah. So that he fights the giant and then, he fights a giant. He's like, all right, thanks everybody. And he goes to leave. And then he's like, what? You want more? Okay, one more song because I'm that great. And then a bell falls on him.
He gets crushed.
The big bell from the fight sequence crushes him. He wakes up in the doctor's office. The doctor basically is like, you died. And Puss is like, yeah, I got 9 lives. And he's like, well, how many times have you died? And there's this kind of morbid comedy sequence of just a montage of all of Puss's previous deaths.
It's really
that's
good.
just a delight. And so that kind of sets us up for that. I mean, do you have anything you want to say in particular about like this initial stretch of the movie? He goes to Mama Luna's like cat house, like a house for rescue cats or stray cats.
At first, he's very hesitant about this because the village doctor says, you need to retire. You're down to your last life. No more adventuring. And he's like, absolutely not. I'm Puss in Boots. Like, they make a whole point. He's got a great song at the beginning of the movie. And there's a whole point of like, Puss in Boots has never been touched by a blade. Like, he has no worries. He is a perfect skilled fighter.
Yeah,
like,
he gambles with his life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no danger to him. And so he's very hesitant about the whole doctor thing, and then goes to the local bar and there's confronted by a very intimidating wolf bounty hunter of sorts who has a wanted poster and is there to claim the reward.
Yeah.
They have a fight sequence and the wolf cuts Puss. Puss loses the fight and
blood happens.
Yeah,
like,
blood happens.
Blood falls down his face. And I remember even just seeing that for the first time. I was like, wait, there's blood in the Puss in Boots movie? Wow. And again, the animation is gorgeous. I can't believe I almost skipped over this initial fight with the wolf. It's incredible. It's gorgeous.
It's so good.
It's, again, the podcast is not the best place to sell it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's just really good. It's really good. You can watch it. It's really good. You guys should watch it. So that's what spurs. He gets humiliated. He gets defeated, and the wolf is like, "Pick up your sword. Pick it up."
And he leaves it
Puss
behind.
Leaves it behind. He runs off. He runs to Mama Luna's little house for cats, and he buries his boots and his hat and his cape, and he gives it a little funeral. And then he has arrived at the end of his life, which is
pretty
just
much
staying in this horrible little house for cats, where he just eats and poops and eats and poops, and that's it.
That's about it.
Forever. And that's where the movie ends.
That's the end of the movie, everybody. While he's there, he meets a couple of recurring characters. First, he meets a dog with no name, which I found out recently from an interview with the director is a deliberate reference to Clint Eastwood's character in the Dollars trilogy, The Man with No Name.
Of course it is.
Is that throughout the movie, there's a running gag of like what they're going to name the dog, because the dog doesn't have a name. But the dog with no name is how he is referred to, at least like on the page, I believe, like in the script, which is kind of fun. And nobody wants him. He is an unwanted dog who is pretending to be a cat so that he can stay with Mama Luna. And he immediately wants to befriend Puss, and Puss is very despondent and depressed because, he lost this fight and he's lost his mojo and
he's lost
no
everything.
Longer, yeah,
he's no longer Puss in Boots.
He can't do anything. He's just going to live out his final life here and be sad and miserable. And while he's there, they encounter Goldilocks and the Three Bears crime family, which are really, really great characters. Goldilocks played by Florence Pugh, this is her first voice acting role.
Yeah, she does a pretty good job.
She did a pretty good job.
Yeah, there's like one thing in like the final climactic fight where she like battle cries, and I'm like, that sounds a bit, it sounds like you were in the studio. It's like you could, but it's great. It's really good. It's a great performance.
Yeah. And they are there looking for Puss to hire him for a job.
Yeah,
but they don't recognize him because he's, he has a beard and he looks slovenly and
bag of bones.
Yeah, so that's where he learns about this wishing star, and it does exist.
Because he overhears, and this movie is for kids.
Yes.
There's a bit of great, but it's never too egregious. The exposition's pretty fun, just like he overhears Goldilocks being like, he's the only cat who could help us, like, rob Jack Horner. Yeah, I mean that's basically, he overhears this, and then he's like, all right, I'm gonna become Puss in Boots again. I'm gonna go do this heist for the map to the wishing star so that I can get my 9 lives back. Mm-hmm. And that sets the plot into motion.
Yes, and while he goes to get this map from Jack Horner, which in all of the advertising for this movie, this character didn't show up once.
They
from
cut
what I could
him.
imagine.
They don't show him in like any of those initial trailers. Not until like the movie came out did they like start including him.
Then he
was
started,
like a secret.
Yeah, so we go to see this movie, Kate and I, for the first time, and we see this guy with just the most ridiculous character design you've ever seen. Like,
he's really tall, but
tiny,
also
skinny legs.
Tiny skinny legs, really short, like gumdrop shaped head, and then just like
super
wide shoulders,
like a box on stilts.
Yeah, and when you're introduced to him, Puss has gone into the factory, and then it just cuts to, you know, this guy walks in, and it's based on the nursery rhyme. Little Jack Horner sat in the corner. Finish
eating
it, Parker.
his Christmas pie.
Nice. And then what happened?
Stuck in his thumb, pulled out a plum, and said, "What a good boy am I."
Nice. Well done. I'd never heard this nursery rhyme before.
Had you not?
I had never heard this before, so I was like, great, all right, cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're introduced to a thumb going into a pie, that thumb entering a mouth, and then
he opens his
he opens his mouth, and the voice of John Mulaney says, "I declare this pie delicious."
And it is the most, like, the least expected voice you think will come out of that body.
Yeah.
Like, when you see this character design, I don't know, I was expecting, like, a deep voice for some reason.
Or like a what's his name? You know, Wreck-It Ralph. He's from
like a
Firefly.
John C. Reilly.
No, I was thinking like, what's his name? He's the Disney guy. He does all the animal voices.
The other guy.
From Firefly. I can't remember his name. I'm so sorry, bud. I know his name most of the time. But you know, like him, like doing King Candy from Wreck-It Ralph.
Sure.
That's kind of a voice maybe like that, or maybe like a deeper voice. But it's
just, there's a John Mulaney jump
Guess
scare.
Who it is? It's me,
John Mulaney.
And it's a good performance.
It is. It's fun.
Just
it's good.
Really shocking because they
Mm-hmm.
didn't market it as like John Mulaney's in this.
Right.
So for you, it was shocking. Before we went in, you were like, Kate mentioned like John Mulaney's in it, and you'll never guess what voice he is. And I was like, yeah, okay, I guess, you know. And I'm thinking maybe he'll show up in a little bit. And I still, even knowing John Mulaney's in this and his voice will surprise you, I still, seeing this character at first, I was like, who's this gonna be? And then that was just a bonkers moment for me.
It's a good moment,
and it's a good performance.
It is.
And talk about the character of Jack Horner, Parker. Who is he?
So Jack Horner
is Jack Horner?
Is he runs the Horner baking goods empire. They make pies. They make lots and lots of pies, you know, based on his nursery rhyme. And he is very upset and bitter at the world because he doesn't have a fairy tale. He's from a nursery rhyme, and a bad and like the worst one at that point. I think one of the Serpent Sisters who he has his opening scene with says like, yeah, a lame one. Yeah.
And
so his obsession is collecting magical artifacts. He wants all the magic in the world because he lives in a magical universe and has no magic himself. Yeah. And so he has flying carpets and phoenixes and unicorn horns and magic wands
and this is one of my favorite things about this universe, and I'm so glad that Puss in Boots: The Last Wish has like taken advantage of it in a way that Shrek hasn't. And I think we've talked about this, of the Shrek movies were so preoccupied with like tearing down fairy tales because they were literally designed to make fun of Disney.
Right.
They were so preoccupied with like, okay, we're going to make fun of fairy tales. We're going to like kind of corrupt them with like modern pop culture references, and we're going to use them to be like, you know what, wow, it's this, but it's this, you know, what if you know, all that stuff. And so, but what Puss in Boots: The Last Wish does is instead it says, okay, well, this is a universe where Alice in Wonderland, Mary Poppins, King Midas, and like every myth, legend, or fairy tale you could ever imagine all exists in the same, like, in some way, it all exists in the same timeline. Unicorns, Cinderella's shoe. But the inclusion of things like King Midas and that sort of thing, and like the Phoenix is like, so this is just everything.
It's
like
just all of it.
Which is fantastic because it means that you can have a character like Jack Horner where he's not just limited to it's the shoe and it's the poison apple. It's also like, yeah, he's going to turn this woman into gold.
And there's a flying carpet.
And there's like, I love that. But also what it does with this character of Jack Horner, and they do it with Goldilocks as well, of using their pre-established, like because we know these characters. I mean, I didn't know Jack Horner, but like the idea of like, the idea of saying, well, Puss in Boots is on his last life. Great idea. But I also think similarly, a great idea is going, okay, the villain of this movie, like one of the, like the external villain of this movie, as we talked about last night, is going to be someone who was in the worst nursery rhyme and therefore is envious of everyone from a fairy tale, from a legend, and wants all of the magic in the world because he is so bitter that he's from the worst nursery rhyme. And I'm sure they had such a field day in the writer's room or whoever of just being like, okay, who's the worst nursery rhyme character?
Right.
And then just having fun with that. And then in the same way with Goldilocks of going, okay, what if Goldilocks stuck around with the bears and now they're a crime family? Like, that's super fun. And I think playing with that is so fun. And I think that Jack Horner is my favorite way they play with it, of using an existing story that we know to motivate a character rather than just making it a joke.
Totally.
So
yeah, it's a good character bit, and it's like I'm going to talk about him and the wolf more a little bit later as like antagonists. But so he has the map to the star, and Puss goes to steal it, and before he can steal it, a previous accomplice of his is already there. Kitty Softpaws, played by Salma Hayek.
Yes.
Who, as I understand, is a returning character from the original film, the first film. But again, as somebody who hasn't seen that or anything else, like, they do a perfectly fine job of like telling you what their dynamic in history is without having to have watched another movie.
Which is so nice, because no one should have to go back and rewatch Puss in Boots 2011. Maybe it's great. I don't know. But
yeah, I also, again, I haven't watched it, but after this movie came out, I've done like a lot of reading and seeing what people are saying about it online and things like that. And there was a kind of prevailing positive from people about this movie is they're like, oh, thank God, like, they desexualized Kitty Softpaws, because apparently she's just very much like a femme fatale character in the first movie.
Yeah.
And they're like, she's a cat. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And in this one, she's just a character. She is equal with
They don't
Puss.
even do like the fake bust thing they do with a lot of female animal characters in movies, where it's like, nope, it's just a cat.
It's just a cat.
She is shaped the exact same way as Puss in Boots.
Right.
And that's great. And
it's very refreshing. It's nice.
And I
like it a lot.
feel like, I don't know, it's kind of nice to be in an era of animation where we've stopped just using animated movies to be horny. Like, thinking about it, like Puss in Boots 2011 being weirdly horny is super weird. And like that movie, this movie kind of dabbles with it a little bit of like, Puss flirts with a woman in one of his death scenes. He's like, do you like gazpacho? But like that first movie is like, Puss in Boots is going to have sex with all of these women. And you're like, but he's a cat.
He's a cat. Why are we doing this?
And like, just like, I don't know. It's nice that we've reached a point where it's like, we don't have to do that all the time.
Yeah.
We don't have to make weird sex jokes in movies. We can just have a good story.
You can just have a good story, and there is like romantic tension between the two, and it works very nice. It's very like wholesome and cute and all that good stuff. Like, it's not like they just rob them of any sort of entanglement romantically, but it's just nice the fact that like they aren't deliberately leaning into all of those animation stereotypes.
Yeah, which is nice. But so the heist, Puss and Kitty get away with the map, and Dog is leading the car. Dog did follow, Perito did follow Puss and is, is kind of driving the carriage for him a little bit. And then Jack Horner says, assemble the baker's dozen. And then he uses a wand. He gathers all of his magical items into Mary Poppins' magic, a magic nanny bag, as he calls it. And then he smashes a pumpkin with the magic wand, and it becomes just this like Mad Max like wagon tank with all of these like these 13 assassins on there, all with like baking and like cooking themed weapons, which is fantastic.
It's really fun.
Just a really great like idea for a villain and a posse of villains. And so they all make chase, and while they're escaping, the wolf is following Puss in Boots. He does his whistle, and it sends the hair up on Puss's back, and the wolf is still following him. So they're introducing that. They get to the dark forest. We can kind of like speed through this a little bit. Yeah, we should really. Yeah, so they get to the dark forest, and then it becomes just kind of like a chase movie of Puss, Kitty, and Perito trying to get to the star, and then Goldilocks and the Three Bears are also after them. because Goldilocks wants to make a wish. Jack Horner's also after them because Jack wants all the magic. As the movie goes along, it's revealed in a very emotional moment that I think is one of yours and Kate's favorite moments in the movie, where we're also spending a good amount of time with Goldie and the three bears. Mama Bear being voiced by Olivia Colman, Papa Bear being voiced by Ray Winstone. Great. At a certain point, they're like, well, why do you want this wish so bad? We've seen the flashback to her and the they're very loving family, genuinely just a loving family. And Goldie reveals, she's like, well, I'm going to wish for a real family. And it like hurts them. But then, do you want to talk about this at all? Have I skipped too much?
No, you're fine. Because like we discovered during some of those flashback things that like Goldilocks wants more than anything a family. And specifically like a human family. She wants to feel like she belongs with these people. But we've seen how loving and affectionate her bear family is, like how she is with them, how they are with her. So not only is it kind of like gutting to the bears to hear this, it's also kind of a devastating thing for us as the audience to hear. Because it's like, well, you have a family. What are you talking about? And there's just this really lovely moment with Mama Bear where she's like, well, whether you think we're your family or not, if getting this wish is going to make you happy, then we'll get it for you. And it's just like, I am a sucker for found family. Like that is probably my biggest, like a trope that is a trope. And I love it every single time it shows up. And like, this fits that bill so well. And also there's so much of that in this movie. Like Puss, Kitty, and Perrito kind of have a found family dynamic.
I mean,
going
Perrito
on,
at one
really
point
lovely.
is kidnapped by Goldie and the three bears. They get crimed. They take Perrito. And he literally tells Goldie, he's like, wow, you won like the orphan lottery here. Like he's pointing it out, but then he also is like, yeah, like, I've got two best friends in a sweater. What more could I wish for? And it's that whole, and again, his place in the movie is really nice because I think in a lesser movie, he could have been the really annoying character for kids.
Totally.
He's kind of hyperactive. He's very silly. And I think there are worse versions of this character in other movies that I have seen.
Absolutely.
Probably in A Secret Life of Pets, if I'd seen those.
Right. And so it's really great. And there's all sorts of really good moments sprinkled throughout all of this. So at a certain point, there is, a big fight scene going on between all three parties of our heroes, the three bears and Goldilocks and Jack Horner and his crew, all fighting over the map. And while that happens, the wolf appears and sends Puss into a panic attack. He just runs, he leaves. And Perrito follows him. And when we were first introduced to Perrito at the beginning of the movie, he says, I'm training to be a therapy dog. He's like, do you want to rub my belly? And Puss goes, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, he says, what the hell are you talking about? Which is like, what? Puss in Boots just said, what the hell?
It's really good.
I love it. Also, when he first runs into Kitty and she's like, who is this guy? He's like, I'm not with him. And Perrito is like, yeah, I'm a therapy dog or whatever. And then Kitty says, good, you need therapy, which is like a really great like joke and also character. Like it tells so much about their relationship,
totally
their knowledge of each other.
It's really good.
And Puss goes into a panic attack during that ambush, runs
Perrito
off.
follows him, and Puss is in the forest, just laying next to a tree, like clutching his
hyperventilating.
chest. And like the sound design puts you in his space, like everything is muffled and you just hear his heartbeat going really, really fast. And Perrito runs up to him and is trying to talk to him, and it's very muffled. He can't hear him. He's trying to like shake Puss, and Puss is just gazing off into infinity, basically. And Perrito looks around and he doesn't know what to do. And he just lays his head on Puss's chest, and slowly Puss's heartbeat starts to normalize, and he takes a deep breath, he closes his eyes,
and even just talking about it makes me want to cry.
It makes me want to cry. It's just like, I watched that for the first time
I saw it. Yeah.
It gets me every time, because as somebody who experiences anxiety and depression, has had panic attacks, like I have a dog, and my dog Toby does that for me when I'm feeling very emotional and overwhelmed. He just has a sense for that, and he'll just come up and nuzzle his way on top of me, and then just having his physical presence there is just a really lovely moment. And like, that was watching the movie the first time, like I turned to Kate, I was like, this movie's a masterpiece. Like, what other animated movie is going to put in a scene of a character having a panic attack and talk about that?
And I think even more specific, who would have expected this from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish to do this? But I think I also read that at a certain point during this production, or during like the early pre-planning stages, Antonio Banderas suffered a heart attack. And so that was a very like, this whole idea of like death and that sort of thing, but also like, oh wow, like kind of fearing death and having that, I think, is a very personal thing from the creative team as a whole, which I think also helps make it just such a meaningful and it's just such a well executed portrayal of panic attacks. Totally. And of it's just what pets can do. Because, even when I was a kid and we had a cat, if we were ever sad or crying, she would come and just sit with you. And it's just really nice.
It is really nice.
Yeah. And so
that's a really great moment. Another really good moment is at a certain point, Puss gets separated from the rest of the group and is trying to meet back up with them. And he is in a place called the Cave of Lost Souls.
And it's his 8 previous lives, all portrayed in how they were when they died. So one of them's super buff. One of them's, got a bunch of cards and stuffed in a hat because he was cheating at poker. They're all there, and basically they're you don't need those other people. It's it's you.
You're a legend.
You're a legend, and they sing "Favorite Fearless Hero," which is a great song. It opens the film, and they sing it again, and they're all having a great time. Cut away for a bit, come back, and Puss is like, "All right, well, I gotta go. This has been fun." And then the wolf shows up, and it's at this point that it is revealed. And for me, it was a genuine reveal because I was just having a lot of fun and I just took it at face value of yeah, this is a bounty hunter. I get it. You I'm sure you had Parker, who watched Jaws at 12, is yes, I know what film language is. He's death. The wolf is death.
He is literal death, and he's there to claim Puss's soul, basically. And he's got so this is what I love so much is that so Jack Horner is entirely an external protagonist. He is there because antagonist. He is there because he wants the wish. And Puss wants the wish, which puts them at odds with each other, right?
Yes.
That is as far as his motivation goes. He doesn't care about Puss's mortality. He doesn't even know any of this going on.
He doesn't really know who Puss is.
No.
He's got more of a background with Kitty, which they mentioned, but he doesn't. Yeah, I was thinking about that watching it last night as my third watch of they don't really interact
they don't know each other.
Interpersonally either, really.
Right. So on one side you have that narrative conflict going on. And then additionally, you have Wolf, who is death. He is an internal antagonist. He is there strictly because of the character arc Puss is going through of, I need to value the life that I have. And that's where their antagonism comes from, is that even during that scene, Death tells Puss, he's like, I find the idea of 9 lives absurd. And you didn't value any of them. He's taking this personally.
And Puss has this kind of, his delivery is almost Scrooge-esque to me. Of he's like, but I'm not, I'm not dead yet. Of when he reveals that he's come, and he's like, yeah, well, I'm sick of you. I'm sick of you, basically. I'm going to
take this one early.
Yeah, he's like, I'm taking this one early because you have never valued any of your 8 previous lives. And I'm just sick of your shit, basically.
Yeah. And he reveals, he's like, I've been there every single time, which is a really good reveal because if you go back and watch the movie again, during that opening fight with the giant, there is one shot of the crowd watching Puss fight the giant, and in the doorway you can see Death watching him, and it's a great little detail.
Yeah, there's a lot of great details of the bell rings 8 times until he dies for the 8th time. There's a lot of great stuff like that in this movie. But yeah, Death is here. So Puss makes an escape. He runs off. Kitty and Perito see him running off.
There's a forced misunderstanding.
There's a bit of a forced misunderstanding, which it's fine. I'm like, it wasn't, we didn't need it. It's fine.
But it's a kid's movie.
Puss makes it to the star. He starts trying to make the wish. Kitty and Perito arrive, and he's like, Death is after me. At which point Jack Horner says, I've been called a lot of things.
But never death.
I like it. And then there's a great moment where all the 3 bears, Goldie, and Jack Horner all make up each point of the 5-point star.
So you got this Mexican standoff.
It's really great with Puss, Kitty, and Perito at the center.
The director has talked about a huge inspiration for this movie being spaghetti westerns, specifically the work of Sergio Leone and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And that scene, it's entirely that. You've got the extreme close-ups on everybody's faces, eyes darting left and right. All right, who's going to make the first move? Hands to the weapons. It's a really great little standoff.
They have a great fight sequence. So what fight sequence was it that you think takes the cake over the opening one? Was it the bar fight with the wolf?
No, it's the final fight with Death.
Yeah.
So everybody has their fight for the star, and they temporarily defeat Jack Horner.
He falls in the bag.
And Puss has the opportunity to make the wish when suddenly Death appears. And it's really nice because the whole time, Death has shown up a couple times and nobody else quite notices him because they're kind of in the midst of chaos.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of wondering, you're like, okay, if he is Death, is it just like a metaphysical like manifestation?
Yeah,
like,
can
is it
other
just
people see
can
him?
others see? Is this actually a real world physical threat, or is it just going on in Puss's mind?
Yeah.
And then he appears, and it's really cool because they've established during the previous fight scene that like the star starts to rise up into the air, and the edges of it have sort of this kind of like force field almost.
Yeah.
And if you get sucked into the force field, you get disintegrated.
Yeah.
We established those stakes, and Death just walks through it.
Yeah.
And then everybody's like, who is that?
Which is like so, I said it last night, I was like, that's really that's really affirming. Like, it's kind of a
Absolutely.
relief when you're like, okay, Death is physically here.
Oh, you see
like,
him. Okay.
Okay, good. Like, for some reason,
Yeah.
I'm very comforted by that for Puss. Oh, yeah,
So-
okay, this fight is fantastic.
He shows up, he creates a ring of fire, basically.
Around him and Puss.
Around him and Puss, separating him from anybody else. And he tosses him his sword, and he says, pick it up. Again, mirroring that first bar fight scene. He's like, all
Yeah.
right, I've carried your sword this whole time. We're going to have this out right now. Like,
Yep.
I've enjoyed the chase. It's over. And what's really great is during that first bar fight scene, when Puss gets cut, he panics and he suddenly, all of his lives flash in front of him. He sees everything that's ever
You
happened
get
to
a
him.
Shrek
and
cameo.
You get a
which
Shrek
is
cameo.
nice.
And Death says, what's the matter? Lives flashing before your eyes. And then we get another callback here where, again, Puss starts to panic. He has the wish, he can make the wish, and he starts flashing to just this life, everything
Yeah,
we've
everything
seen
with
in this
Kitty and
movie.
Perito.
And he opens his eyes, and his eyes are
Death
filled with
says-
tears.
And Death says, lives flashing before your eyes. And he goes, no, just one.
Oh, it's so good.
And then he fights.
He says, I'm done running. He picks up his sword. He
And he-
does his catchphrase,
Fear me if you dare. And he fights Death. This movie ends with Puss in Boots.
Puss in Boots fights Death at the end of this movie, you
And
guys.
it is a fantastic action sequence.
It's so good.
That at that point last night watching it, the whole time I'm like, what's my funny Letterboxd review going to be? What's my funny quip going to be? And then watching that fight sequence, I literally just like had this overwhelming emotion of just like, I love this. So my review just reads, I love you, Puss in Boots, in all caps. Because that moment is so, there's this great, he knocks his sword and his hat and his cape away from him or whatever, or his hat and his sword, tears
And he
his cape.
slashes his boot.
And then he brings his sword down on him, and Puss uses his gatito blade, which Kitty had gifted him when he didn't have a sword, and it's really great. He like, because of the force from Death's like scythe, basically, he like spins around him and grabs his hat and grabs his sword, and then he keeps fighting, and it's really good. Again, I can't really.
You gotta watch
explain
it.
You gotta see it to believe it. And he fights Death, and then at the end, he does have a great moment where he kicks the scythe back to Death, and he says, "Pick it up," which is incredible stuff.
It's so good.
And he basically defeats Death, and he says, "What does he say?" He says basically like,
He says, I know I can't defeat you, Lobo, but I'll never stop fighting
for this life. Yeah.
And then
Death-
the wolf gets very frustrated. And he says,
Yep.
I came here for a cocky little legend who thought he was immortal, but I don't see him anymore.
Yeah.
And he tells him to live his life.
Which
and
is
he
a
leaves.
nice mirror of earlier when Kitty said, she's like, they were going to get married at one point. And
Yeah, we
it's the
skipped
whole
that.
thing. We skipped that.
It's a whole thing.
It is a lovely little scene.
Yes.
But she says, I didn't want to show up to the wedding for that guy. And she's like, but, I don't see him anymore. So it's like
He
a
doesn't
nice,
seem
he's
like that
changed.
guy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Death just says, he's like, I don't see him anymore. That's not what I came for, whatever. And he leaves and he says, live your life, Puss in Boots. Live it well. And then Puss in Boots says, hasta la muerto, which is just like
Which means till we meet in death.
It's so rad. It's like
It's
the
so
coolest,
cool.
it's the
It's
coolest
so
thing
hype.
that could have ever happened in a movie.
Yeah.
And then Jack Horner gets real big and comes
Gets
out of the
real
bag
big.
because it was set up earlier. Chekhov's Alice in Wonderland treats of, get real big treats.
Yes.
He comes out of the bag. They fight him. They defeat him by tearing the map. He falls in. And Parker, how did we miss?
We didn't talk about ethical
How did we not talk about Ethical Bug?
So
We're
there's
going to go a little over
Jiminy,
because we got to talk about Ethical Bug.
there's a Jiminy Cricket insert character, which is he's the cricket from Pinocchio essentially. But For unknown reasons, the creative choice was to give him a Jimmy Stewart impression. So he talks like this. He says, "Oh, well, I'm your conscience. I'm here to help you realize what's right and wrong." And he's the best character in the movie.
He's the best character in the movie because in the middle of like kind of an ambush earlier, or like a fight earlier, Jack Horner brings him out. He's like, "Oh yeah, this locust of death," and then it's the cricket. He's like, "Oh, hi, Jack," and he's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I'm your conscience." And my favorite thing about this character is just everything that he says and does. But also the fact that he is not voiced by a celebrity. He is not voiced by a known impressionist. He is voiced by a man whose only IMDb credits before this were as like marketing production teams.
He was like a story artist or something on
but
like
not even that. He was
like
he's like a production.
He's worked on a couple DreamWorks things
as like a production office assistant and as like maybe like a storyboard artist, which implies to me that at some point in the creative process, in the script writing process, they went, "Oh, it would be really funny if the ethical bug was Jimmy Stewart. For some reason, we think that's really funny." And then someone else said, "Oh, well,
Kevin does that."
Kevin, the production office assistant or whatever from like 10 years ago that I worked with on Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs or whatever, he's really good. He's got a great really Jimmy Stewart impression.
And they put him in the movie.
And he's like he's the best comedic moments of the movie. And it's really good. So the ethical bug at this point has been flicked off. And then he comes back right at the end. He goes,
destroys. Consider this my resignation.
And then he burns the map, the last bit of the map, and everything falls, and Jack Horner falls into the nothingness. And
he does the Terminator thumbs down.
The big Terminator thumbs down, and he says, like, what
did I do to deserve this?
What specifically? And it's kind of like, I kind of love it because you could read it as like, well, he put his thumb in too many pies. He wanted too much, But it's just really good.
It is really
good big defeat of Jack Horner. And then, at this point also, Goldie has decided not to make the wish. In the final fight, she decides not to. She helps save her brother from getting disintegrated by the force field walls. Great movie this is, because I just said that.
Killer stuff.
I don't know why I said great movie this is, like I'm Yoda. Anyways, they all have a lovely time, and they name the dog, and the dog's like, "I just want to be named Perito, because that's what you call me already." And then we get the title card, closing the movie. Everyone goes, "Oh, it's all great. Yeah, everything's been resolved." And then, Parker, your favorite part of the movie is that they steal a ship. The three of them, they steal a ship, and they're sailing to far, far away from Shrek 2.
We get a Shrek tease.
We get a Shrek tease, and I think it's fun. I like it. I think it's nice. I don't know how.
Perito asks where they're going, and he says, and Puss says, "On new adventures and to visit some old friends." And then they play the Shrek
theme, and you see Far, Far Away.
And that's the end of the movie.
And it's a good movie. Great movie.
It's a really good. Like, again, this is going to sound crazy, and it might just sound crazy because this is more recent and like maybe fewer people have seen it. Explaining this movie is not doing justice. You need to go watch this movie.
I think
we spent this whole time explaining stuff.
I think that people will, I think people would go, "Oh wow, I have to see Puss in Boots fight death," but you don't understand.
You don't get it until you watch it.
Incredible it is until you watch it.
Right. So
these moments are all so much better when you see them.
Absolutely. So we've rambled on for a really long time here.
We have.
So let's move into our criteria to wrap things up here, to kind of compare it to the greatest film of all time, Citizen Kane. So, Max, historical and technological relevance.
So,
what do you think?
I'm going to give it a Citizen Kane. Simply because it hasn't been long enough to know how this influences animation. I think that I think that this is part of a wider movement that we're seeing because of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I think that really opened up Western animation to new ideas, new techniques, because off of that you have Mitchell's versus the Machines, you have the bad guys, you have this, and then you have the upcoming Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, which looks great.
Does look great.
So I think that as far as from a technical standpoint, I love that this movie, it's obviously not just doing the Spider-Verse thing.
Sure,
I think
it looks different.
It looks different. It's doing more of a paint stroke effect.
Yeah, it's much more fairy tale looking.
It is. And
than
I think,
like comic book.
Yeah, it's not doing comic book stuff. It's, it's very specific to what its movie kind of needs and its theming. But really, we don't know. But I think that this is just as part of a wider movement. I'd be more willing to give that point to Spider-Verse rather than Puss in Boots.
I think that's fair.
But I do think, and this is what I think might happen, I think that this movie specifically might push Disney over the edge to try something different. I think it's a little too late for their upcoming ones, like Wish, which is about, or whatever it's about, the wishing star comes to life, which comes out this year, I think. But, it's interesting to see that Sony and DreamWorks are more willing to move into this. And then you have, Disney and Pixar's, changed their style a little bit with things like Luca, and Disney changed a little bit with Strange World, but it's still that kind of, that gummy flesh look of just like, this is what it's looked like for, the last 15 years. So this is what we're doing. But I think that Puss in Boots, simply because I feel like Strange World didn't do well at all.
No.
And Puss in Boots has made all the money.
It's doing really well.
It's doing really well. And so I think that this might be the final straw for Disney. I think that they might be like, fine. We didn't innovate this animation technique, but we're willing to try it. Or they'll try something else, trying to compete with that.
Sure.
So I think that's where I'm at with it. What do you think?
About the same. Like, I think this is another good step moving forward. But like you said, if we were to give that point, that would be a point for Spider-Verse rather than this, because Spider-Verse is the innovator. Spider-Verse is the thing that starts it. And this is a good step forward. And I like the fact that it's not just doing Spider-Verse, because that's
you kind of get that with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
That's the one concern I have with TMNT.
Feels like it's just doing.
Yeah, it's very.
I don't know why I use their
similar.
government name every time.
Yeah,
you're like, TMNT, and I'm like, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, full name, please.
Please.
But yeah, so I would agree. I think, like you said, too soon to tell, and isn't doing it first the same way that Citizen Kane is. So I think I can give this point to Citizen Kane.
Yeah, but I will say the action in this looks fantastic, and I hope that I hope that other movies continue to do that, and to continue to just be like, we can do whatever. Like, totally, it can be super stylized. We can have speed lines. We can have like face distortion when they're running at each other to like fight. Like, just have fun with it, Western animation. That's what I say.
Like the last thing I'll say about the style before we move on to the next one is like, it is very like anime inspired.
Yes,
there's a lot of that going on, which I think is working. Which is why
I think I keep also being like Western animation, because obviously, outside of America, outside of Hollywood, animation has been doing a lot of interesting things for decades. But I think that it's very exciting to see Hollywood studios, the big animation studios in America, kind of doing this as well.
Totally.
So I think I'd give the point to Citizen Kane. But okay, great. So how well do you think this movie is doing what it's trying to do?
Oh, man. I mean, I've watched this movie 6 times now, and I've consistently given it 4.5 stars every single time.
Yeah.
The only things I don't like about it are that they do the Goldilocks too hot, too cold, just right.
Do it too many
way
times.
too many times.
Yeah.
It's like 6 or 7, and you only need like 3.
Yeah.
And then the forced misunderstanding feels forced and doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
But like, those are such minor things that it's like a 1/2 star for me. Like, this is, again, I've watched this thing 6 times in 3 months, and I keep wanting to come back to it because it's just consistently operating on a level that works for me. And I think they're absolutely achieving everything they wanted to achieve with it, which is really great.
I agree. I think there's everything that they're trying to do. Like even most of the jokes land. The action is fantastic. The emotional beats and the stakes are very well communicated. Death is a fantastic villain, right down to the character design and everything else about him.
Yes.
The performance as well. Like it's operating on such like a fantastic level of just, you're watching it, it's just kinetic. It's just absolutely wonderful and moves right along and glides. It's great.
It is.
I think, is it doing what it's trying to do better than Citizen Kane in that case?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
I think what it's trying to do is a fun action adventure fairy tale, and it achieves that with flying colors.
Absolutely.
And it also deserves props for carving an identity out for itself as a sequel to a spin-off of a previous franchise that is not this tone at all. That is pop culture references and gross out humor.
And being horny for cats or whatever.
Yes. And this is so not that. And I think they're just hitting it out of the park. So I give that point to Puss in Boots.
And also, again, just like if their goal was to make the most use of animation, they did. this is
Absolutely.
This is animation at its, at one of its peaks, at one of it in a direction you can take it. Obviously, there's different directions you can take animation, but it looks and it moves fantastically.
Totally.
It's really wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. So this is a tough one.
Oh wow, this last one.
Does this emotionally connect for you, Parker?
I watched it with you and Kate last night, and I cried 3 separate times. So yeah, I'm gonna go with yes on that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good.
It's really good.
It connects, absolutely.
So
The
with
emotions
a 2-to-1 winning ratio, we can officially deem we are the first people on planet Earth to say this, I think.
I think we are.
Puss in Boots is definitively better than Citizen Kane, ladies and
Puss in
gentlemen.
Boots: The Last Wish is better than Citizen Kane.
Absolutely.
And I said this last night, maybe if Citizen Kane opened with a fantastic giant fighting action sequence, or even just Citizen Kane singing a song.
Look, if Citizen Kane fought death, maybe I'd be interested.
I kind of love the idea of calling him Citizen Kane, like that's his name.
Yeah, that's his name. It's not Charlie Foster Kane.
No, it's Citizen. They call him Citizen. They go, hey, Citizen.
Yeah,
Citizen,
first name
can you come in
Citizen,
here?
last name Kane.
Yeah, if he had fought death with a sword,
Yeah.
maybe it would
Go
have
watch this movie, you guys.
Go watch this movie.
Go watch, more
Support
than
this
any of
movie.
the others we've watched so far. Go watch this movie. It's still in theaters. It just barely got released on Blu-ray and digital.
It's streaming
go buy
on
it,
Peacock.
Go watch it. It's
If you have
streaming on
Peacock.
Peacock. Go watch this movie, and I promise you a good time.
It's
I
a fun
promise
time.
You will have a fun time.
It's a really fun time, and it's really great.
That's basically it for this. Anything else to add, Max, before I wrap us up?
No, I just think that next week I can't wait to go on more adventures and see some old friends. That's not going to happen. It's just us again next week, I'm
it's
pretty
just
sure.
us again.
We saw our old friends last week.
Yes, we did. Speaking of the next time we record, though, we just did something contemporary of the year 2020. We are now rewinding almost exactly 100 years. We are jumping back to the beginning of cinema because at this point we've covered something from the 50s, we've done something from the 90s, we've done something from the 2000s, the 70s, the 2020s. And now we're going to the 1920s, baby. We're going all the way back.
100 years back.
Yeah. 1927's Metropolis, which, Max, I believe you've never seen this before?
I've never seen Metropolis.
I'm very excited to see what you think of this movie.
I rented it from the library once, and then I just didn't get around to it. Had to return it, and then I watched other movies. I didn't even watch it for like film history class ever. So I'm excited. I think also what a fun we love throwing our audience around Whiplash
I love
style.
it. I think it's good.
Puss in Boots, Metropolis. Metropolis, I assume, also has a fantastic death fight sequence.
Yeah, it's got a killer opening song too.
Great.
So look forward to that, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all so much, as always, for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.